You're listening to the Plane Talking UK podcast, the UK-based podcast written by a passenger for anyone. And here are your hosts, Carla Stebbings, Matt Smith and Neville Bounds.
Well, hello and welcome to episode 222 of the Plane Talking UK podcast. My name's Neville Bounds and welcome one and all. And there's no Carlos this week as he's got, a better offer, Matt, I believe. Is that right? Is that possible?
Well, I had heard a rumour he has indeed got a better offer. I think he's actually gone to a family wedding that he would have, I think, given half a chance, got out of if he was not given the three-line whip by his wife not to. So, yes, he has had to leave us in charge. So I can't promise we're going to behave ourselves, though, Nev.
No, I think that all bets are off, really, aren't they? But
certainly. Yes.
In order to keep some semblance of order in the show, we are joined from the east coast, the northeast coast of the United States, by our favourite uncle, the main man, Micah. Hello, Micah. How are you?
Hey, Nev. Great to see you. Thank you so much for inviting me onto the show. And yes, here I am back in Maine after a long trip up and down the east coast of the United States. Yes,
you've been a bit busy. We'll come on to that in a second. But also joining us from his home, I think, is Owen. Owen, are you there?
Yes, indeed. And I know the video might keep cutting out, so many apologies about that. But yeah, I'm coming in to you from just outside Stansted in a little town called Bishop Stortford.
Very nice too. So what's everyone been up to this week? Matt, you've been a busy chap this week?
Yeah, well, my boss has been away, so I've sort of been in the office with the girls. Basically, we've been sort of making sure the orders are all leaving on time, and lots of customisations this week. I've been doing nothing but print cards this week. I don't know quite why it's been so mad. And then I had a little jolly to London actually for Lambert's, doing a bit of bus driving on the Thursday, so that was nice. Took a group to go and see Aladdin yesterday. So one of the things I'd like to go and see myself actually. So. Didn't quite get the opportunity to do that. Now, of course, Nev, it's I think it's worth mentioning that for quite what feels like forever, frankly, you've been missing from this little enterprise, and I believe you have a very good excuse.
Well, I'm not sure it's a good excuse, but it is an excuse. The first week I was away, I just literally come back from Las Vegas that afternoon. It was not in a fit state to do anything sensible or even not sensible.
Unsensible, yes.
So that was the first week. And then the small matter of June the 12th, which was a Tuesday, when Sue and I got married.
Aww.
And then on the Wednesday, the 13th, we were off to Portugal for a week on our honeymoon. So.
Oh,
very nice indeed. And the weather could not have been better. It was one of those sort of weeks where everything was just perfect. It's between 24 and 26 degrees, which was just nice. It wasn't too hot. But funny enough, 26 degrees in the Algarve feels a lot hotter than 26 degrees here for some reason. I don't know why.
See, I reckon it's all about that humidity thing, isn't it?
I think it is, yes. But very nice and fully relaxed. And actually, we were so tired yesterday, not for reasons that you might think. But
stop it, family show, please. Moving on. Oh, dear.
But we just have done nothing the whole week, and it's been brilliant. We haven't done that for a very long time. So actually just doing housework or cleaning the car or whatever it was, it was a bit tiring.
Exhausting.
So,
absolutely. And of course, the one thing that you don't take into consideration, I suppose, when you go away, of course, it's lovely. There's this hay fever thing that we all seem to be stuck with at the moment. It's just quite nice not to go anywhere other than the United Kingdom, and it's fine. And I know, Owen, you rather suffer from that as well. It's
yeah, it's not a nice time of year for me here in the UK. It's
still never mind.
Yeah, I prefer it. I prefer it when I'm flying.
Yeah, I can say if it's any consolation, of course, it's we are now over the worst of it. If you see what I mean, it's supposed to be getting better from now on. Everyone, good news. Still, yes. Never mind.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, yeah. I'm hoping for. I'm considering actually getting shares in Pirates. I think that's going to be the answer.
Here it's not so much hay fever as we have pine pollen, and the pine pollen is just. It comes out so thick that I have to wash the car every day. I have a car that's red. Now, if it was the color of Neville's car, you wouldn't even notice it, but it's bright yellow coating of powder all over my car every morning for the past month or so at this point.
Wow. God.
Now, Micah, you've been a busy chap, haven't you, over the last week or so? Tell us about your travels, what you've been up to.
Well, as part of the Airplane Geeks, we were invited down to the Smithsonian Institution Udvar Hazy Center for the Innovations in Flight Family Day that takes place every year, the Saturday before Father's Day. And we did not a live podcast, but we recorded our podcast from there for this week and just had an amazing number of guests. We had an astronaut, Adam Klein, who's a research pilot and astronaut at the Johnson Space Center. We had one of the members of the Society of Women Engineers who was presenting there. We interviewed the pilot of a Grumman HU-16C Albatross flying boat, and boy, was that just amazing what he's planning on doing with that. We talked to an A320 pilot. We talked to an A380 pilot. We had a couple of Civil Air Patrol cadets. These were young ladies who were still in secondary school, in high school. They were just sophomores, but our cadet, one was a cadet lieutenant, the other a cadet tech sergeant, and they just did a marvelous job of representing the Civil Air Patrol and what they do. Tanya Wyman showed up, and then some other friends of ours were there. Captain Rick Bell and Dispatcher Mike and Captain Nielsen. Good old Captain Jeff was there. So,
Captain Nielsen? Who?
Captain Nielsen. You've never heard of him before,
No,
have you?
No, absolutely. Who? Oh, wow.
And we interviewed all of those folks. And if you want to hear it, you can go to this week's Airplane Geeks, episode 508. And it was we almost got to the length of an airline pilot guy show.
What?
Yeah. It's 2 hours and 49 minutes worth of interviews, plus all the fun that happened afterwards at the Red Robin at the big meetup. And the only thing that was missing, well, there were a lot of people missing, but the biggest miss down there was all our good friends from the UK who couldn't make it this time, but maybe one day.
Oh, who knows? Yeah, maybe one day we'll make it out there. Sounds amazing.
Yeah, and it's an awesome museum, isn't it, Micah, having now been there once already. And you could spend, days in there, actually. One day is not enough, is it?
Not at all. Not at all. And we were fortunate enough because we had to set up. We were able to get in before anybody else was there. And one of the biggest thrills of that museum for me this time, because I've been there a few times, was walking in at 8:30 in the morning, and Brian and I drove in, and in the back of the car, because she was also with us, was our good friend Jen Niffer, and she had never seen the museum before. So to watch her walk in from a back door and see everything and see her eyes light up was just a delight, I've got to say. To be able to watch somebody see it for the first time was just great.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. Well, that's great, Micah. Thanks for sharing that with us. And really appreciate you sending us the photos as well. It's great seeing a few people that we all know there.
Yeah, lots of very, 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 very familiar faces in there. Craig and all sorts. Yeah, absolutely.
There are. Good. Okay, right. Well, let's start off the show then with the commercial segment for this week. So if you're ready, Matt.
Goodness me, no, but yes.
And if you're ready, Micah.
All set.
And if you're ready, Owen.
I'm good to go.
Let's go. Well, starting off this week is I hope no one's having their lunch, dinner or breakfast at the moment, because this is on the local10.com website. And it says that passengers begin vomiting as airline cabin fills with mist.
Oh, dear.
It says that passengers on a delayed flight in India began vomiting when a mist filled the plane's cabin after the pilot turned the air conditioning on full power. The Express reports that the pilot turned the AC on full in order to get passengers to depart the AirAsia flight, which was stuck in Kolkata in India. The passengers initially refused as they were being asked to go outside during a heavy rainstorm. Video from inside the plane shows mist from the air vents quickly filling the cabin, whilst the sound of passengers vomiting and coughing can be heard in the background.
Oh, dear.
The flight, which was scheduled to Bagdogra, was delayed for over 4 hours, and passengers said that they were given no explanation for the delay and were forced to disembark without any warning. AirAsia reportedly claimed that the air conditioning had been turned on as a result of high humidity, but did not respond as to the health status of the passengers. Now, of course, the media have had an absolute field day with this over the last couple of days, but frankly speaking, I see it as a bit of a non-event. I see it often, mainly on Airbus aircraft, actually, but very often you're just sitting around waiting to go, and you see some condensation coming out of the vents. Not quite to the extent that these people have experienced, I have to concede, but I don't think it's mist, it's condensation at the end of the day.
I think it's not helped, essentially, I suppose, perhaps because there is, for whatever reason, an awful smell that has accompanied it. Perhaps that's where some of this problem has sort of stemmed from. But as you say, I mean, quite often when you get those extreme temperature changes, when they first kick on, when the aircon first kicks in, obviously when everything's all been powered up for the first time, of course, if it is quite sort of humid inside the cabin, of course you will see the vapour coming out because it's sort of hitting the air and reacting, isn't it? I mean, surely that's common sense, isn't it?
Yes, well, it is, but I think obviously there's some quite extremes of temperature involved there, but nonetheless, it's not ideal. But of course, I've noticed that there was, because there's been some video associated with this, there's been all sorts of media outlets asking people for their information and can they use their video and would they like to talk about it, and
right.
It's not exactly.
This came up a couple of weeks ago on Leo Laporte's The Tech Guy show, and I happened to be listening when Johnny Jett, who is his travel expert, came on and started talking about this, and I called in and got in right away and explained this is something Captain Jeff talked about with APG. It's a regular occurrence. It's just condensation that happens, and what I really am curious about, because it happens more often than we know, the vomiting that was reported, psychogenic illness, which used to be called mass hysteria, but it's defined currently, it's called psychogenic illness, and it passes on from one person to another. I can't imagine that maybe one person got scared, vomited from that, and it got passed on that someone got sick. It happens more often than we know.
Yeah, absolutely right. But there we are. So on to the next story. Who's going to do this one? Is this one for Owen, Matt?
No, this one would be for me. He's having to reboot at the moment. Some minor technical glitches in Bishop Stortford currently. So the Clare Herald is the document that we're reading this from, and the headline is Ryanair's Alicante service goes year-round, which is good news if you want to go out there. So there is further good news for winter sun seekers today, with Ryanair confirming that it will extend its Alicante Spain service to a year-round operation. Alicante had been running as a summer season only service, ceasing at the end of October, but this year it will run right through thanks to the strong interest in the service, as confirmed by today's decision by Ryanair. So the historic city of Alicante, which is located on the Costa Bianca, is one of Spain's most popular tourism cities and a huge favourite with the Irish. It's because they just get rain where they live. The flights will operate Monday and Friday, departing Shannon at 15:30 and arriving in Alicante at 19:20. The return flight departs Alicante at 19:55 local time, arriving back at Shannon at 21:55. Seats are on sale now, everyone. Great news. Said Shannon Airport Managing Director Andrew Murphy, this is really positive news. Alicante has excellent climate and is a very popular destination year-round. A lot of Irish people have holiday homes out there, so so there was a natural demand for the service to go all year round. Now that Ryanair and Shannon have delivered on our side of the bargain, it's up to the public to take advantage. He continued, this is keeping the momentum going in what's been a very positive year so far for Shannon. Our passenger numbers were up by 5% in the first quarter alone, and we're having a very busy summer. All our markets are up, and this is largely due to new services or increased frequencies on existing ones. So good news then, I suppose. It's, as I say, coming from Shannon there, so you go to Alicante all year round, everyone.
Oh, nice. I've not actually been exactly to that spot, but I've been in that part of the world. So
Yeah.
it is very nice, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. I dare say Owen has been there, but we can't talk to him at the moment because he's fallen offline. So.
Okay.
Have you done? Have you been to Europe much, Micah, other than to London?
No, I've not. I've been to the UK a couple of times, 3 times. I've been to Paris once, but other than that, have not made it anyplace else. But truly want to, and hope to do that one day.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the next story will be with you, if that's okay, Micah.
Fine by me, and it's one that I was following on Twitter the other day, and it's from the BBC, so it's got to be true.
Oh, good old BBC.
British Airways cancels 2,000 incorrectly cheap tickets. More than 2,000 British Airways passengers have had their tickets canceled because the prices were too cheap, a travel agent has said. Travel Up chief Ali Shah said he believes another 5 agencies also sold tickets through the airline's mistake. BA has apologized for the error on flights to Tel Aviv and Dubai, but refused to say how many were affected. Customers say they were angry that the tickets were not being honored. Mr. Shah said flights normally cost more than £200 were advertised for £1 plus airport taxes, which can be several £100s, between 17:45 British Standard Time, 11 June, and 11 a.m. the following day. The agent, who said more than 2,000 of his customers have been affected, said, quote, "It's very cruel for the customers because they have booked these flights in good faith and expected it to be honored. But I can also understand British Airways' position. It's human error," unquote. Mr. Shah said all affected customers are being contacted and BA will provide a full refund as well as a £100 voucher. Travel Up customer Ash Gubay from London says he had booked a return flight to Tel Aviv for £195, but now has to pay £1,000. And we could go on with this, but this happens all the time.
Yeah.
And some airlines honor the price when they make the mistake. I know for a fact United has, which is a nice thing to say about United, and some airlines don't. But
I think the other thing is I think that they've made a bit of an error here because BA have been through the ringer so much in the last few months about all sorts of things, and it would have been such an easy win for them, wouldn't it, to have honoured those
Very
prices and lost a few £100 on the way, a few £1,000 maybe as well. But actually, I think for the PR value, they should have just let them have the tickets.
I completely agree, and they should have advertised it and really done some publicity about it, saying we made a mistake, but we honor our mistake, and when we do something good for a passenger, we'll talk about that. When we make a mistake and it's in the passenger's best interest, we'll take care of that too, because we are, after all, BA. That's Air Nev.
Yeah, well, indeed. And of course, I mean, let's so on the picture there is of a 747. Have I identified that correctly?
Yes, you have.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Yes.
So, I mean, how many people get me? How many people will that plane actually hold?
Oh, just under 400 probably.
So we're basically only looking at like the equivalent of 4 flights. You know, so you think, well, surely the common sense would say, for the sake of just 4 flights going out really cheaply, do you know what I mean? You just sort of think, well, just honour it and not upset everyone. Also,
I think that the thing to remember here is that all of the money usually is made in business class and first class.
Yeah.
There's very little money made in the economy fares on these aircraft. So, you know, it would have been an easy win. And what's happened now, of course, is Virgin Atlantic have taken the initiative and they're now doing advertising saying, oh, you know, we honour our prices. So that they've now stolen the march on BA because of it.
Let me ask you a question. When prices are advertised in the UK for airfares, do they have the fare separate from the taxes so that you can actually see how much the taxes is, or is it lumped together into one number?
No, it is all split out. And actually when I'm doing my expenses for work and I'm adding it all up, that there's all sorts of, you know, air passenger duty fare, there's taxes, especially, I mean, long haul in particular is very expensive, but it is all split out, yes, into individual categories.
In the US, it's one price. So if you saw the price of £195, which is $1 for the fare and plus all the £194 in taxes, you'd think, okay, it's a £200 fare to the Tel Aviv, maybe it's a low price. But if you see it as being a £1 fare, wouldn't you think, well, I'm capitalizing on a mistake that someone made?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think some common sense has to prevail somewhere, doesn't it?
Again, it's just you do worry about the marketing department that's in charge at BA sometimes, don't you? I mean, it's something's not right there, is it? Really, it could have been handled. It's again, it's the same thing with the whole IT debacle, isn't it? The whole thing could have been handled so much better.
Yeah, I think people accept that there's going to be difficulties and problems from time to time. There's going to be outages of all sorts of things, but it depends how the PR and marketing folks put the spin on it. They have been left wanting on a number of occasions. I've got to say.
Indeed. So we're going to move on to the next story now. I don't know. I think Owen has just come back, but I don't know if he's ready to read story number 4. I'll take that
in about 2 minutes
Oh,
because
no.
I'm waiting for my emails to load up.
Okay, all right. Well,
I'm
I'll tell
not
you
too
what.
sure why the camera won't stay on though. That's the most annoying.
Gotta love technology. Nev, do you want to take the next story then, and we'll keep moving while he's.
I will. And this is on the Fortune.com website, and it says that JetBlue Airways founder David Neilman is setting his sights high once again, raising $100 million for a new low-cost US airline he hopes to launch by 2020. Dubbed Moxie Airways, the venture would use a fleet of lightweight carbon fiber Bombardier CS-300 aircraft and smaller airports such as Fort Worth in Texas and Burbank, California, in an effort to reduce fuel consumption, wait times, and other air travel-related fees and hassles, according to Bloomberg. Led by the Brazilian-American airline industry entrepreneur, an investment group has been soliciting Chinese funders to pay for 18 of the required planes. Neilman will also put his own money into Moxie, which has secured orders for 60 C-Series jets from Canada's Bombardier so far. Neilman has had a hand in sending a number of airlines into the skies, including Morris Air, which Southwest acquired in 1993 within Morris's first year of business. Neilman also founded Brazilian airline Azul and Canadian low-cost carrier WestJet, and is an investor in TAP Air Portugal. He launched JetBlue in 2000 and famously donated his salary as the CEO each year to a crisis fund for airline employees. So, Mike, this guy's got a bit of a track record here. Do you think he'll make a go of this?
Oh, he sure does. You know, he's not only founded JetBlue, but he founded Azul, which is a Brazilian airline, and was also, involved in the founding of WestJet. And I suspect that this could really work with the CS-300s. He's got a really good track record. And JetBlue happens to be probably one of my favorite U.S. airlines. They're very, very comfortable to fly, and he did a great job. He's not with them any longer, but I suspect it's going to happen.
And they're like a low cost model, are they? They're
low cost, like Southwest is low cost. Nobody's low cost anymore. They're just a smaller. There's low cost and there's low value.
Right.
JetBlue is a full service airline, and they started up as a low cost carrier, but their prices are the same as anyone else. But they just happen to have really good service, like.
Right.
Southwest and like Alaska and like Virgin America did before it was bought up by Alaska. I highly recommend them.
Yeah, it's a company I'd love to fly out with, JetBlue. I'd love to try them out.
Yeah, they sound like it. Yeah, they sound good. Have you had the pleasure, Nev?
No, I haven't actually. I'd like to, but yeah, I hear lots of good things about them as well. So yes, next time I'm in the US flying around, I'd like to do that actually.
Yeah, I must admit, I sort of beginning to realise actually how lucky we are here in Europe, because very few people have like the low cost models that we're so used to here in the UK. I mean, it's, when they I know it is when they say no frills, they really do mean no frills. But I mean, when you think like my trip to Rome that we did, and I think that was £70 return. I mean, that's so cheap. I mean, we just take that for granted here in Europe, don't we? That you can literally jump on the equivalent of an Airbus, although it's a Boeing in this case, but you can jump on an Airbus and go wherever you want for less than it would cost you to go to London on the train.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you're very, very fortunate because here, in the U.S., I've thought about, and probably next time I will fly rather than drive to Dulles Airport, but it's about a 600-mile distance, and flying is I'd never be able to fly for less than $350, $400. Where if that was within Europe, you could probably do. I mean, what's the distance from London to Rome? It's got to be not very much more, and you were able to do it for £70 return.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's insane, and we were working it out, weren't we, Matt? That that was actually cheaper than to go from Beccles, which is just outside of Bungay, where you are. To London. It was cheaper to go to Rome than it was a return train.
That's right. Yeah,
going down to London.
I think it was something. It was £80 each way, wasn't it, to actually go by
so,
train from Beccles to London, or if you can get yourself to Stansted, you can go to Rome for like literally half price. It's crazy.
It was crazy. Crazy. But the low-cost airlines in Europe have definitely made the world and Europe a lot smaller. And even, there's companies doing prices as low as €2 sometimes, where they are actually just €2 fares. And granted, there's not many seats on, price like that. But, EasyJet have done it. Ryanair have done it. I think Jet2 have done it at
yes,
some
they
stage.
have. They have.
Yeah. So they've all collectively they've made Europe a really small place, which is just great when you want to travel and when you want to see the world a little bit.
Well, and of course, with when you think like the size of America and how the vast the continent on its own is, it is genuinely astounding that somebody hasn't done the same as what we've got here in Europe. I mean, Micah, I almost can't believe it.
Well, they've tried, and there is Frontier Airlines and Spirit and a few others, but sometimes with some of those airlines, the service is so low. I mean, and we joke about Ryanair, but the service is there because they go so regularly. That, you don't want to go on the low cost carrier because they fee you to death. And whereas on the other hand, in the U.S., I was thinking the hotels are so much less expensive than what you find for the value in Europe and the UK. I stayed at a division of Marriott called the Residence Inn, had a full suite with a full kitchen. I mean, a full kitchen, a huge room.
Yeah.
And
those Residence Inn are great.
Yeah, and it was less than $100 a night, which is incredible. Where if I were to be paying for that same size room in some place in Europe, it would probably be 3 or 4 times that.
At least, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I noticed when I went to Las Vegas the other week, I had a sort of regular room, which was actually pretty good. But my colleague AJ, he got a suite, and he showed me a picture of it. I said, AJ, that's not a suite, that's a conference room that they've
really.
It's absolutely incredible. Wow.
Yeah,
but no, I think hotel value is hard to find in Europe and certainly in the UK. It's all very expensive.
Unless in our case you have a Jenny who is sorting out your accommodation and you're able to get a very nice room with air conditioning and all sorts for not very much money at all.
Yeah, definitely shout out to Jenny for helping us out.
God, yeah, that was absolutely astounding. Anyway, we should probably move on to the next story if that's all right. Owen, are you ready to read a story? So this is this is on the express.co.uk.
It is indeed, and this says British Airways publicly slam Heathrow for unacceptable 2-hour border queues. And you know what? 2-hour border queues, I kind of have to agree. Couldn't be waiting around that long. British Airways have publicly spoken up about passport control queues at London Heathrow Airport. They've accused the London airport of making people wait for over 2 hours in lengthy queues amid a sea of people. Visitors flying to the UK and Brits flying home all deserve better, a British Airways spokesperson told express.co.uk. It's totally unacceptable that returning families and visitors regularly face huge queues and a sea of people due to inadequately staffed desks and gates in the immigration hall. We understand the importance of policing our borders, but what is the cost to our economy of putting off business travellers who frequently have to endure queues of 2 hours or more? The UK needs to show it's open to the world, but sadly the figures show that the queues are getting worse, not better. So we're urging government to take action to prevent summary of misery for thousands of travellers. British Airways have revealed that official targets for clearing immigration haven't been met on more than 3,500 occasions this year, said the Evening Standard. The most recently, figures shows 70,000 passengers at Heathrow have been made to wait too long. The Home Office targets are for Britons and travellers from the European Economic Area to get through immigration within 25 minutes, and the rest of the world getting through within 45 minutes. BA have blamed a lack of UK Border Force staff for the long waits, as well as the regular closure of a number of e-gates, which were initially intended to speed up the immigration process. It just basically goes on to say that the amount of people coming in are just they can't go through the border quick enough. But I think this is a worldwide problem. I know in JFK it can be pretty bad in the US. Here at London Stansted, it is absolutely awful sometimes. Heathrow is the same. When I went into Gatwick, that was a nightmare. So it was, it definitely does something needs to be done. But I think it's just a manpower issue.
Now, Nev, I'm going to ask a question here because I seem to recall somebody having a certain change to their ability to travel, and presumably that was all okay for when you went to Vegas because you've got this new global traveller thing. Did that make much of a difference?
Yes, that did work very well for me. I paid my £62 to the British government and then the $100 to the US federal thingy, I would imagine, and that gives me global entry in and out of the US, and that means that all you've got to do is put your passport in one of the e-readers and put your fingerprints on another what's it called, area where it is. That's it, scanner, that's the word I'm looking for. And that was brilliant. That was literally 2.5-3 minutes, the whole thing, and it worked perfectly. So they were doing interviews at the American Embassy in London for all of that. I'm not sure if they're doing it at the moment, but it certainly, even if you just use it once, it makes a huge difference.
Really?
And actually, for a change, on the way back from Heathrow, all the way into Heathrow from Portugal, this week, the queues weren't too bad, but also all the e-reader gates were working properly as well, and that made a huge difference. It's when you see a massive queue and there's like 10 of the gates inoperative, and that's a hopeless case when that happens.
I had a question about that too, Nev, because you got the global entry to get you in and out of the U.S. I have some friends that one of them is a British subject and has a British passport, and his wife is from the U.S. here, and they just flew to the U.K. and they got in at their usual time with all the planes coming in from starting at 6 in the morning or so and going to about 11. And he, with his British passport, he passed right through in Heathrow, but she was in line for about an hour and a half trying to get through. Is there a similar kind of global entry for U.S. citizens into the U.K. as is offered?
Not as I understand it, no. But I'm sure that there will be a reciprocal arrangement sooner rather than later. And although actually, having said that, I do know of people that do have that kind of maybe not called global entry, it's called something else. But certainly there are options there where you can effectively jump the queue by just having your passport and your fingerprints checked. Having said that, I've been at Heathrow many times when it's been, the queue has almost been as long as the flight on the short haul sector.
Really? Wow.
That just makes it, ridiculous. So they've got to do whatever the people do with global entry and that kind of thing. They've got to do better, I think, at organising this.
The first time I'd ever experienced this, Owen, what was it that we did when we went through Stansted? Because we did a massive queue jump at security. Is that fast track?
Oh yeah, fast track security.
Yeah. I'd never done that before. That was quite quite the most amazing thing.
Yeah.
Especially at that time of the morning, because there's just chaos around you, and it was just like, and I'm busy following Owen because he knows Stansted quite well, so we're being sort of frog marched down the other part of the airport, and it was just like saying goodbye to all the security as we go, way there we go, and straight through and on. I mean, do you do that when you're travelling, Neff?
Sometimes you only get that normally if you have paid for a fast track entry.
Yes.
Through the airport, or if you're on a business class ticket. Those are the two ways you can get through the fast track. Having said that, the fast track going out to Faro the other day from Heathrow was not fast at all. They were doing lots of mucking about.
Oh, really?
No faster than the regular line, to be honest with you.
Oh, well, that's
Yeah,
good.
you kind of have to pick and choose which airports that you use it at, because definitely some airports really don't make a difference whether you buy fast track or not. But definitely Stansted at the busy rush hour times, yeah, absolutely. I think it's a necessary a necessary addition.
Evil, yes.
The other thing you just mentioned, the word that I was thinking of, Owen, is you said rush hour times, and I'm curious about that in Heathrow and in every place, is that there's times when there are rush hours and all the aircraft from all over the world are coming in constantly between 6 and 9 a.m. or 6 a.m. and 11 a.m. and other parts of the day, other times of the day, it's really slowed down. So couldn't a lot of this be handled through traffic control and not based on the number of aircraft coming in? Is there even a way to do that? Is Heathrow that busy 24 hours a day that it can't be done?
No, I think that they have natural sort of very high volumes of traffic, particularly first thing in the morning from the incoming flights to the US. So you've got 747s, A350s, A380s, the whole lot coming in between sort of 7 o'clock in the morning and 12. But before that, you've got the Asian carriers coming in from Singapore. So again, very high volumes coming in there. Then you've got the regular European flights as well. So there are natural rush hours to the whole thing. But it's you don't want to be in a rush. That would be my
no, indeed. Indeed. And it was I must admit, this time coming through, it's the very first time that my e-passport worked as well. I was actually able to use the e-gates because they were working at Stansted when we came back, and I was actually able
very
to.
Weird.
It was very weird. It actually worked. In fact, you were the one that got stopped for a change, not me, which is most unusual.
Yeah, well, my passport doesn't really work with the e-gates, and I've been told by Border Force not to use it with the e-gates, despite the fact that it's got the little
chip in it,
electronic chip in it. But what I do when I'm traveling within Europe is I use my Irish passport card, which has all the bells and whistles with it, the electronic chip and everything in it. But it's just an ID card. And generally speaking, the lines for the ID cards are a little bit shorter, especially in Stansted. So whenever I'm traveling, it's easiest just to use that.
Just to use the card and go through.
Yeah.
Looking in the chat room, Liz said that when she came through London Heathrow last year, it only took her 20 minutes to get through with no problems at all. But as I was going to point out, and Lane Street already did, obviously they knew who she was.
Well, of course, indeed, absolutely. What was it? Neil Lamwan is saying that I remember Heathrow being fine when we went to Atlanta just a few years ago. US immigration wasn't bad really, a little bit slow, but it was okay. I guess it depends on what time you hit it again, doesn't it? This is the same issue.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. But,
indeed, we really should move on, I suppose.
Yes, moving on. So. Is it me that's taking the next story?
Yeah, go on then. Why not?
Yes, I'm just slightly out of sequence there.
Yeah.
This is on the flightglobal.com website, and it says that Airbus does not foresee a need for a further hike to its maximum takeoff weight of the A330 Neo following its decision to lift the threshold to 251 tons.
Ooh.
Its A330 Neo is currently based on a 242-ton maximum takeoff weight airframe introduced in 2015, and the A330-900 has a range of 6,550 nautical miles. Airbus had gradually lifted the maximum takeoff weight of the A330 since the -300 entered service in 1994 at 212 tons. The airframer expects to put the higher weight version of the A330 Neo into service in mid-2020, lifting the A330-900's range to 7,200 nautical miles. A330 Neo program manager Odile Jubecourt, speaking to Flight Global in Toulouse ahead of a route-proving flight to Lisbon, said she did not expect the type to require a further maximum takeoff weight increase. I don't think there's a need to do it, she said, adding that in terms of the range, the aircraft already has a huge capability. But she also points out that the ultimate decision will depend on market demands and states it will always be in our DNA to look for incremental improvements. Jubecourt had previously described the 251-ton figure as a best compromise for the A330 Neo, which is powered by Rolls-Royce Trent 7000 engines. She also stresses that the A330 Neo testing has not revealed any evidence of problems with the power plant, despite it being its design being derived from the Boeing 787's Trent 1000, currently the subject of extensive scrutiny over blade durability. Jubecourt insists that the Trent 7000 is a different power plant. We're very confident about the engine, she says, but adds that the company is still cooperating closely with Rolls-Royce given the Trent 1000 situation. And route proving is part of the final stages of certification for the A330-900, which is set to enter service with TAP Portugal this summer. Airbus also intends to start flight testing the smaller A330-800 this year, says Jubecourt, which will also be offered as a 251-ton aircraft with a range of 8,150 nautical miles. So they're squeezing more and more out of existing airframes, or improving the airframes, obviously, to get to better range. And I guess it depends on the routes that they're going to send them to, as well as to the performance that they need from the aircraft and the capacity.
Yeah.
You know, I've always been curious about why they were working on the A330 Neo as opposed to just developing the A350, which is, they're about the same size, more or less, aren't they? Both twin engines.
Very similar. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it because of they've got lots of the A330 airframes kicking around? I mean,
I think it's also maybe existing A330 customers. So TAP Portugal is a big A330 customer, and others as well. So maybe they, because of, I mean, obviously there's lots of cross-crew qualifications as well. So if there was an A350 offered, there would have to be significant training and what have you.
Retype-rated,
but for those...
When we interviewed Airbus at Farnborough a couple of years ago about the A350, they were saying that they wanted it and expected to be in the same class as the A330. And just like Nick can go from the A330 to the A340, they expected people to be able to go right to the A350.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, in that case, it does sort of question maybe why they haven't sort of started developing that over and just sticking with the A330 Neo. Who knows?
Well, I think it could be due to markets as well. In that it might not be a good time to be buying an amazing amount of aircraft. And while
you're not going to say that word Brexit, are you?
I'm not going to mention that at all. But if people aren't buying the new products, they need to still keep a bit of revenue, and they need to keep people interested in their products, and maybe it's just to maximize the life of these A330s, and then eventually it'll go to a point where they have to get the A350, you know.
But the A330 Neo, I don't think it's a conversion of the A330. It's right, okay. It's a new aircraft. It's like the 737 Max as opposed to the 737.
Oh,
brand
right,
new
okay.
aircraft. So, I don't know.
No. Yeah, I think we need to do some more research on this, I think.
Yes. So who's taking the next story now? With this on the.
I reckon Micah should have a go at this one.
Well, yes. American Airlines.
Yeah.
It's from a motley fool, and naturally, if it's foolish, it should be me.
Well, indeed.
American Airlines suffers the latest airline IT meltdown. And American Airlines, now this is what I always love about these stories. The headline, American Airlines suffers the latest IT meltdown. Then the secondary headline: American Airlines subsidiary PSA Airlines says, "Wait a minute, was it American Airlines or was it the subsidiary?" Now, granted, it's PSA, which is actually a wholly owned subsidiary of American Airlines. Stands for Pacific Southwest Airlines. Canceled more than 1,000 regional flights since last Thursday. And this was dated June 19th, which was Tuesday of this week, after a hardware issue took its crew scheduling system offline. Within the span of a month, during the summer of 2016, two top 4 U.S. airlines suffered crippling IT failures. Delta and Southwest were each forced to cancel thousands of flights during peak season, leading to lost revenue and reputational damage. The summer of 2018 peak season is just getting started, but there's already been a major airline IT failure. The past week, cancellations have rapidly mounted at American Airlines' regional subsidiary, PSA, due to problems with the carrier's crew scheduling system. With the airlines increasingly highlighting reliability as a key selling point for business travelers, it's an unfortunate incident for American Airlines. Unfortunate? That's a great word.
They're trying not to upset the shareholders, I think that's what.
The PSA Airlines is a regional airline that operates 50 to 76 seat jets for American, mainly from the carrier's massive hub in Charlotte. While many of the regional airlines that fly smaller planes for the legacy carrier are independently owned, PSA is a subsidiary of American. Last Thursday, that's not yesterday, but the day before, a week before yesterday, as we're recording this, last Thursday, PSA Airlines experienced a hardware issue at its headquarters in Dayton, Ohio, that impacted its crew scheduling and tracking system. This made it impossible for PSA to properly match its pilots and flight attendants with its aircraft. Not surprisingly, this led to a huge number of flight cancellations. PSA Airlines canceled 275 flights on Thursday, 400 flights on Friday, and most of those flights were headed into or out of the Charlotte hub. PSA tried to return to a normal schedule over the weekend, but it didn't take long for the IT issue to reappear. The carrier canceled about 50 flights on Saturday and hundreds on Sunday. By Monday, the cumulative number of flight cancellations had surpassed 1,100. PSA also canceled flights on Tuesday morning. While American Airlines says that PSA Airlines is now stabilized, its computer systems will take several days to resume a full schedule due to crews and aircraft being out of position.
Well, and of course, that's always the problem with anything like this. Of course, it's not so much the initial incident that took everything down, but of course, everything's in the wrong place, isn't it? Because you've aircraft that were supposed to be at the other end of the country are now not. They're still in Charlotte, for example. I mean, that's often more the problem, isn't it? After an issue like this is actually getting everybody back to where they should be.
And one of the things that I heard on Twitter and some other places is that PSA was sending out emails to its crew saying, "Email us back and let us know where you are." They had no idea where they were positioned all over the country, which is
goodness me,
pretty amazing.
Well, I maybe it's time that we all had trackers. Perhaps that's the answer. We should all be, have a chip in our hand, and then everybody will know where we are at all times.
Oh, and can you imagine what would have happened, being crew, if that happened at HarpJet? How would that have been handled? I can't imagine that going on.
Well, funny you should say that. I've actually experienced something like it, and not that the system down itself, we could actually track where everyone was and what everyone was doing, but we couldn't make any changes. So anytime that there was a issue and the aircraft was slightly delayed, it was very difficult to update the issue. And the way we got around with it is that we have manual backup for absolutely everything. So it's all done on paper then, and you just back it on paper like you would on a computer. It's a long, slow process, but you try and make sure that everything else runs as swiftly as possible, and to minimize the sort of effect of what slowing down by doing the paperwork manually does. So it actually had very little effect for HarpJet when that happened. But it is very interesting because it's kind of archaic almost to be using just paper strips to keep a town crew.
Well, I mean, it's novel.
But that's one of the things that frightens me overall about technology in general, is that we've lost the ability to do things on paper, and because we're so reliant on IT, that when something goes bad, it's gone, and we're really in trouble. And I think that's something we need to consider, because that's how the new wars are going to be fought. It's going to be over IT.
True.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And actually, just not quite the same example, but Sue is obviously, for some reason, she wants to take my name as her married name.
Did she?
She has just created a massive spreadsheet of all the things she's got to change with regards just to change her surname, and the list is well into sort of 40, 45 items.
Really?
And of course, you can only do it online, or the most part you can, and then you've got to back it up with secondary evidence and sending off marriage certificates and all the rest of it. And it's we've just been doing it for a couple of days now. We've not even broken the back of it. There's just so much to do, and it's very, very time consuming as well. So that's assuming, of course. I mean, if you imagine if you didn't have a computer, if you were not in the IT world, you wouldn't have any choice in the matter, really. You'd have to go down to your local library and borrow a computer or something like that, I imagine.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it is I mean, I love my technology, as everybody knows, but there are times where you just think, oh, can't I just send in a form and be done with it? Do I have to really sort of jump through all this? I mean, presumably, Mrs. Nev is obviously quite prolific when it comes to using her tablet.
Oh, definitely, and she's got an iMac as well. So she likes using all that, but it is very hard work to do all these things. But like when you change your address, there's so many things. There's always one or two that you've forgotten as well. Usually, I
mean, I've been moved house now like over a year, and I'm still finding things that are going to the wrong. Discovering that I've got the wrong address. I ordered a delivery of trousers, believe it or not, with a company called Giacomo, and it was just wrong. I just ordered it. I didn't think anything of it, but because it was an address that hadn't been changed.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, precisely. But there you are. That's
indeed.
How it is, isn't it? So,
I reckon you should take the next story, Nev.
Oh, do you think so? Yes, this story has annoyed me so much this week. I've got all cross about it.
Have you? Okay, brace yourselves, everyone.
I'll try and read it in a sensible and professional manner.
Right, good luck, everyone.
It is on the dailymail.co.uk. That's all you need to know really about this story. Do you remember the BA 777 that had an engine fire at Las Vegas?
No, never heard of it.
In September 2015. Gosh, was it that long ago?
Really?
Well, the captain, who was hailed a hero at the time, was to blame for a chaotic evacuation, federal investigators said. One flight attendant was seriously injured after fire ripped through the engine of the aircraft at McCarran International in September 2015. All 157 passengers and 13 crew on board the Boeing 777-236ER jet, which was bound for London Gatwick, were able to evacuate, but the plane was substantially damaged by fire. And yesterday, the US NTSB released its report into the incident, which it blamed a fatigue crack in the left engine compressor for the fire. The NTSB said that the captain, Chris Henke from Reading, Berkshire, aborted the takeoff just 2 seconds after the left engine failed and brought the plane to a halt within 13 seconds. But it also blamed Henke for the chaotic evacuation that followed. After a fire alarm sounded, the captain called for an engine fire checklist, but it took him 22 seconds to follow the checklist's order to close a valve that shuts off fuel to the engine. During that time, Boeing estimated that 97 gallons of fuel spilled onto the runway, helping to feed the fire. The report also found that the captain called for an evacuation before completing an evacuation checklist. The checklist would have required him to shut both engines down, but instead the right engine remained on, which hampered the evacuation because it was blowing on the exit slides. The report estimated that the right engine remained on for 43 seconds after the captain called for an evacuation. A relief pilot noticed and told the captain to shut it down. The plane was only 55% full and the evacuation took 2 minutes and 32 seconds. The fire was extinguished by the emergency vehicles within 5 minutes of the left engine failure, the report said. And it goes on and on and on. I mean, there's two shocking things to this story. A, what on earth is a 777 doing only being 55% full? Right. So someone hasn't sold the tickets very well on that sector.
No.
But B, yes, there was a serious injury, but I think the skipper did a very good job, as did all the crew, the cabin crew in particular, and the relief pilot and the first officer. And clearly, yes, it wasn't textbook. There were some things which weren't quite right, but at the end of the day, everybody got out. And I think the response of the fire service at McCarran was exemplary as well. They came. It's a big airport there, so they came out very quickly indeed. And there was lots of mention in the press about the plane not being evacuated within the 90 seconds that people expect it to be or is required to be. But at the end of the day, that's the target. And there are all sorts of extenuating circumstances. And there was a pretty big fire going on here. So I think he stopped it very quickly, got everybody out. And but do you notice there's lots of people carrying
their bags? I was about to say that.
I was going to scream that. I'm so upset. Look at those morons. Those morons with baggage. The plane is on fire. So what do? They grab their bags.
I know.
And the 90 seconds to not evacuate it in, is it 90 seconds with all the exits? If an engine's running.
Usually with half the exits unavailable.
Yeah, it's 90 seconds with half the exits. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, though, the one thing that's really frustrating about this story is the fact that, does it really matter? Well, I suppose you could argue perhaps not shutting the engines down, therefore, more fuel going on the runway. I suppose you could argue that was a bit, inconvenient. But as you say, everybody got off. There was a good reason as to the actual, the serious injury. It could have been a lot worse. Why? I suppose they have to have these investigations, though, don't they? They have to get to the bottom of what actually happened, maybe so that people can learn from them.
Yeah, I did actually read the NTSB report yesterday when I read about it. And, of course, all these things are mentioned, but, of course, the media just have to make such a meal of it. And they fail to recognise all the other, mitigating factors. And I don't see anything in this article that mentions lots of passengers carrying their bags off the plane. So,
and the other question I had, they talked about the fact that it took 22 seconds for the pilot to get down the engine shutoff checklist. Is that because it took 22 seconds for him to find the checklist, or is it because the checklist is it takes 22 seconds because you're going through everything on the checklist, and the checklist needs to be shorter if you want it to take less time?
I think also, obviously, that there are, having spoken to Nick and Al and other people, there obviously very much standard operating procedures for this sort of thing, which is what everybody trains for in the simulator. But at the end of the day, there's a degree of some discretion on the part of the captain, I would have thought, in these circumstances.
Well,
the moment you take that away, then I think you're losing something.
And of course, when you're doing these things in the simulator, with the best simulator in the world, you cannot simulate the panic that goes through one. I know all of these pilots obviously are trained professionals. I know that. But when you're physically in that situation, you have very little control over that rush of adrenaline that will no doubt have hit the pilot and the first officer. So you've just sort of. You're going to struggle to think 100% clearly in that initial moment. Or it might take you 5-6 seconds to just, even just sort of snap yourself out of it and then do it. Do you know what I mean? But in that initial, it takes you a minute to realise that this is actually happening. Do you know what I mean? It's, you could easily account for 5 seconds of this so-called delay just purely because he's trying to work out, is this actually as serious as I think it is? Yes, it is. Right, let's do the checklist.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, and you have to go through the decision-making process anyway. So that decision-making process. Well, what's the course of action? What's the problem? What's the course of action? Definitely, that takes time too. So I don't think 22 seconds is very long, to be perfectly honest with you. Yeah, and in terms of the evacuation, there is absolutely no way that you can evacuate an aircraft in 90 seconds if passengers take their bags.
No.
That's just a reality. They said it was only 55% full, and it took 2 minutes and 32 seconds. And yeah, okay, that's a minute over, but the size of some of these bags that you can see, like they're full rollerboards.
I mean, we have this conversation every time there's been an evacuation, and the morons are taking their bags. There's. I mean, how do we stop this? Because this is now a problem, isn't it? I mean,
there's a simple way to stop it. There really is. When someone comes off with their bags, they are arrested by the federal government for not following flight crew orders. Because that's the display, and the evacuation display says don't take your bags. It says go. All you got to do is start arresting them and finding them, and it'll stop.
Yeah, and I think I'd kind of like that to happen.
Is that practical though? I don't mean to be boring. I know what everybody's supposed to do, but I mean, is the other solution basically that everybody has to put all their baggage in the hold, apart from if you need medical medicine, basically? I mean, is that the other option?
I think the fact that you have so few evacuations per year, and I think that it would kick up quite a bit of fuss with passengers. It already kicks up fuss when you try and take it and gate tag them and put them into the hold when you don't have enough space in the bins anymore on any airline. That kicks up a fuss. So yeah, it's.
And the other thing that needs to happen is the NTSB, and probably it'll happen here in the U.S. Congress at some point or another, needs to look into evacuation standards. And the 90 seconds that we talk about, when that's tested, that's all done with trained crew and people that know what's going on, that have evacuated before, and usually in good physical shape. And they need to look into that and change things around. And it may make flying more expensive in the long run, because aircraft may need to be redesigned for different kinds of evacuation. But that 90 seconds, I don't believe it can happen if you really have a 777 filled with people, of real passengers, with only half the exits open. And especially when we're crowding people in with shorter seat pitch or smaller seat pitch, people just can't move. And I think this is something that really needs to be examined very, very seriously, because it's truly going to become a danger at some point. And unfortunately, it won't be examined until there really are a number of deaths from it.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say, actually. Is this is the trouble with something like this. They will look at it, but only when something horrific has occurred. And then they'll make all the alterations that they need to. But, I mean, I'm pretty sure that virtually every single person who is listening to this show right now will not do something so stupid as to try and take their cabin bag with them. I just despair. I really do.
We're preaching to the choir.
Yeah,
I was going to say, our audience is very, very bright and knows aviation, so we're preaching to the choir. I wish that we could get this out to other places.
Here's the thing. I mean, what do you need to take with you when it's your life in the balance?
Yeah.
What do you need to take with you?
Nothing. You don't
exactly. There's absolutely nothing that you need to take with you. And if there are things that you feel that you 100% need, such as a passport or that sort of thing, that's why you wear trousers with pockets, and you put those things that you can't evacuate without into your pockets. And that's about it. You need absolutely nothing else.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, anything else can be replaced. I mean, that's what it is. Your life is priceless, literally priceless.
Yeah.
But anyway, we could go on and on about this, and we probably will for weeks and months and years on end. So maybe we should move on. I'll take the next one, shall I? I haven't read one for a little while.
Please do.
Okay, good news, everyone. It's a short one, so you haven't got to put with my terrible reading for long. It's on the Economic Times, and the headline is Cathay Pacific adds advanced Airbus A350-1000 into its fleet. So Cathay Pacific is all set to fly home the newest member of of its family, the advanced Airbus A350-1000 from Airbus headquarters at Toulouse, France, to its home in Hong Kong. The Asian airline, which took delivery of the aircraft at the Airbus delivery centre earlier this morning, will fly it back to Hong Kong on a blend of biofuel. Ooh. It is the second airline to acquire the A350-1000 after Airbus delivered the first to Qatar Airways. Cathay is due to take delivery of 8 of these aircraft this year, with the remainder due to arrive by 2021. After initial rounds of regional services starting with Hong Kong, Taipei? Taipei, sorry, I'm very, very bad at these names. On the 1st of July 2018, the A350-1000 will launch Cathay's new service from Hong Kong to Washington, D.C. on September the 15th. At 8,153 miles, it will also be the longest service on its network. The aircraft will also help Cathay serve Madrid, Tel Aviv, Amsterdam, SA, Manchester and Zurich later. The A350-1000 is more fuel efficient and can carry 334 passengers. That is 54 more than the A350-900. Great news, everyone. They're packing a few more in. More people to take their hand luggage with them in the event of an evacuation.
No, this is a really, really cool thing that they're going on a blend of biofuel.
Yeah,
I think it's a good step in the right direction.
It's interesting. What is made of? What is the blend with? Well, we need a fuel expert, don't we? Because aviation fuel is basically kerosene, isn't it? Or kerosene based.
Yes, and the biofuel, they make biodiesel. Kerosene and diesel are very similar, yeah. And they make it with fish and chips oil that's left over.
Whee!
They make it out of that.
Always happy to oblige. Eating the fish and chips required, of course.
Absolutely, you're eating for aviation.
Absolutely. Mind you, we had our fair share of ice creams in Rome, did we not, Owen?
I think that should be our new tagline: eating for aviation.
Eating for aviation, yeah. I think it's certainly going to be the headline for this week's story. I think for this week's show.
Yeah, I think Sam Chewy. I think you had him on the show.
We did, yes,
a few months ago, but he did. I think he was on this flight.
Oh, was he?
Or at the flight that came back from Toulouse, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
That does sound like something he'd do.
Yeah. Because on his website, he's got a few fantastic pictures of the new Cathay Pacific A350-1000. And some of the journalists and the management and the passengers that went with them. But yeah, if you want to take a look at some of the pictures from that, head to Sam Chewy. That's SamChui.com, and he's got a fantastic blog about exactly that flight.
Indeed, there we go. In fact, there it is. I found the email now. There we are. It's just what Owen was talking about. So it's yes, he was indeed on that flight. Okay, let's move on.
Yeah. This is who wants to take this story? This is another dailymail.co.uk story.
I think Micas should do the honours. What do you reckon?
Yes, I think so.
He doesn't have to actually read this newspaper.
It sounds like it's the National Enquirer of the UK.
I fear you may be right.
Friday, June 22nd. It's today. Faster in-flight Wi-Fi is on the way.
Woohoo!
Researchers develop more efficient way to send signals between airplanes and stations on the ground. And they're using radio frequency range of 71 to 76 gigahertz from air-to-ground connection. Commercially, could potentially allow broadband internet and video on demand. And this is researchers at have developed a more efficient way to transfer data from aircraft to the ground station, potentially allowing for faster Wi-Fi on commercial airlines. A team from Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Germany, please pardon my bad German, has managed to transfer signals at a rate of 8 gigabytes per second from the air for the first time ever. The rapid transfer could allow for broadband internet and video on demand to be made available on passenger airplanes. Now, before I go any further, Nev, that doesn't seem particularly fast, and don't we already have speeds close to that at this point?
Yes, I don't know what the full story is here, but also to do video on demand. Imagine, for a full plane load of passengers as well. I just don't understand how all the bandwidth is going to work.
Because you're essentially going to share that you're going to share that 8 gigs down essentially with what, sort of 270, 280 passengers.
Yeah.
How is that? I mean, you'd be lucky if they're all connected online. You're going to be lucky if you could send WhatsApps backwards and forwards to each other.
It also says in that story that to put it in perspective. Sorry to talk over you, Micah. That the rate of data would allow for 600 different 4K video streams to be watched simultaneously. Well, that's not going to happen, is it? Let's be sensible.
Do you think this story is possibly? Do you think?
No, I don't think we need to go any further with this story.
I mean, do you think they've possibly got some details incorrect in this story, and the fact perhaps that the throughput that they're talking about is much higher than their? I mean, because mind you, it did say 8 gig. Is it 8 gig or 8? Is it 8 gigabit?
Let me go.
Or is it 8 megabit?
8 gigabits per second.
So 8 gigabits is a reasonable amount.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds more like it.
Yeah,
but I don't think it's particularly being able to stream live. I don't think it's particularly new. I know that at one point Brian and I were pursuing a possibility with a Middle East carrier of doing a live stream, live broadcast from one of their aircraft. It didn't work out, but in terms of having that happen, but they felt that their data stream was fast enough for us to be able to do that already. So I don't quite get this. I don't see what the point is at this point.
No.
Well, that's the next OB.
That's the next episode broadcast. Oh yeah, I dream on. Yeah, I don't think we'd ever get permission, would we? Because if something went wrong, oh boy. But yeah. So Nev, I think you should take the next story.
Oh yes, it's another. There's lots of BA stuff. Isn't there?
Because Carlos is not here. He's just torturing us all. That's what he's doing.
What it is. Yeah. Well, it's a good news story for a change.
What?
And it's on the businesstraveller.com, and it says that British Airways has named its 28th and latest Streamliner aircraft after its late employee Paul Jarvis. Jarvis, who passed away in May at the age of 72, was the carrier's museum curator and has worked for BA for over 50 years.
Wow.
The recently delivered 787-8 aircraft, registration Golf Zulu Bravo Juliet, is the only plane in BA's fleet to bear a name and the first ever in the airline's history to be named after a member of staff. A spokesman for BA said that Paul had made a huge contribution to British Airways. His wife Nadine and daughters Lisa and Claire were invited to Boeing's Seattle factory to unveil the name on the side of the aircraft. Well, that's a really nice touch, isn't it, from them to do that with such a loyal employee, and what a shame that he is no longer with us. But yeah, what a fantastic career this gentleman's had.
He has.
Yeah. Great way to honour someone.
Yeah,
certainly is. I should just say very quickly that I think Richard Adams has busy been having worked on helicopters before. He's busy been painting. Whilst watching the show, he's been working on his next creation.
Oh, cool.
Now, what is one of those? I think he did put the details in the email for me. Actually, I'll see if I can find them. So it's quite a cool bit of kit. As I say, I always love it when people. This is the joy of live, isn't it? While we're busy doing the show. So the helicopter was hi chaps. The helicopter was finished last week, and now making some fuel system modifications to this bad boy. So there we go. Wow, it's nice to know that he's being entertained in his workshop while he's setting up. So we've got one more story to go in the commercial segment, and we haven't heard much from Owen, so I reckon we should give that one to him.
Okay, so this one is from flightglobal.com, and it says Delta orders 20 replacement CRJ 900s.
Ooh.
Delta Airline has ordered 20 of the Bombardier CRJ-900s.
No, you're not saying it right. I'm sorry, you're not saying it right.
to replace older regional jets in its feeder fleet. The aircraft will have 70 seats and will come equipped with Canadian airframers' atmosphere cabin, says the US carrier. Deliveries will begin later this year and run through 2020. Bombardier said the deal is worth $961 million at list prices. But we all know that no carrier pays list prices for any aircraft. But anyway, Atlanta-based Delta does not say what regional aircraft the CRJ-900s will replace, nor which Delta connection carrier will operate them. However, they are likely to replace either the Bombardier CRJ-700s or the Embraer 170s with 69 seats and are comparably sized to the 70-seat CRJ-900s. The airline already has 82 CRJ-700s operated by Endeavour Air, ExpressJet Airlines, GoJet Airlines, and SkyWest Airlines in the fleet at the end of March. It also had 20 Embraer 170s operated by Republic Airlines. Delta is in the process of winding down its feeder agreement with ExpressJet, and this includes the removal of 30 CRJ-700s for Delta, which has yet to name a replacement. The mainline carrier has 151 CRJ-900s, and Delta's order is the second for the Bombardier CRJ family from the USA this year, with the earlier one being American Airlines, who ordered 15 for PSA, the one we were talking about earlier in May, I think.
Indeed. Bombardier! That's better. Sorry. Phew. Thank goodness for that. Oh, I was coming over all unnecessary all the way through that. Bombardier? Yeah. Honestly, where's the fun in that? Come on, it's all about beer on this show.
End the commercial news segment. Next up is a video interview that Carlos and I did when we went to Bruntingthorpe a couple of weeks ago. And the weather was absolutely perfect during the day, and it was just starting to turn towards the end of the afternoon. But we did some fantastic interviews, and here's another one. And this is the one where we interviewed the crew of the Handley Page Victor tanker. And we talked to the three gentlemen there who were on the Black Buck mission to the Ascension Islands during the Falklands War. And it makes for a really interesting historic interview, I think. So let's have a look and a listen.
So we are here next to the Victor tanker at Bruntingthorpe. And we're here with Mike, Bob and Glyn. And they're the team that fly and look after the aircraft. So who should we pick on first? Glyn, so tell us a bit about what you do here with the Victor.
Twice a year on the bank holidays, May and August, second bank holidays, we prep the aircraft and taxi it and wind it up and taxi it down the runway. Before all the cars blocked the runways, we used to get up to 100 knots or so, stream the parachute and turn around and then go back and show it off to the crowd. And we've done that for about the last 10 years, something like that. But this year, because of the restrictions, we're only going to taxi it up and down quite slowly. So we haven't taxied it for about 8 months. So yesterday we prepped it and the engine started first time, more or less, and with a little bit of tickling and trying to get generators and hydraulics working, and it's all ready to go in about just over an hour's time.
We're looking forward to that as well.
So are they.
Yeah, I think everyone's looking forward to seeing this particular aircraft today. So, Bob, tell us a bit about yourself. What's your role here with the Victor?
Well, I spent quite a lot of time on K1 Victors initially in the early 70s, and then flew the Mark II in the 80s. In 82, I was crewed up with these two guys, and we got involved in the Falklands War, of course. So we all deployed to Ascension on the 18th of April, 1982, and then we, of note, participated in Black Buck 1, which was the first of the bombing missions against Port Stanley.
That must have been some experience.
Well, it was an interesting night, inevitably, because it was the first of a series of bombing raids. We had to learn all the lessons on that first trip, and in many ways that formed the blueprint, if you like, for the follow-on missions. There were some 7 missions planned, of which 5 were completed. But the first one, Black Buck 1, was always going to be the most tentative because we were learning as we went along. And sure enough, they didn't let us down. A number of unserviceabilities, a couple of aeroplanes had to turn back, and then one guy in particular had a fairly serious fuel leak, and his return to ascension wasn't assured initially. And then on the final part of the mission, we were left quite short of fuel, and needless to say, the inbound wave, the second wave that was launching to recover the Vulcan, ended up having to be completely remastered, and fortunately one of the aeroplanes was sent to us to give us some necessary fuel about a couple of thousand miles south of the island before we could get back.
So Bob, tell us a bit about the characteristics then of the Victor.
Well, this was the follow-on aircraft from the Mark I, which itself was a bomber and then converted into the tanker. With this aeroplane they added the underwing tanks, the large bulbous tanks mid-span, and the larger intakes show that the engines were much more powerful. The Conway, almost twice as powerful as the original Sapphires. So the airplane was given a massive boost in terms of performance, but it still had the centerline hose and the 2 wing hoses to enable it to be a very flexible tanker. And even in 1982, although it had been in service for probably the basic airplane for the best part of 30 years, it certainly, pulled its punches through the Falklands War.
Wow, and what's she like to fly?
I've always enjoyed flying the aeroplane. It's a bit of a beast. It's a bit heavy initially. It's a bit heavy longitudinally. But one of the thrills in the air tanking role, was that we did a lot of close formation, and also were able to take fuel from another tanker. So that meant we spent a lot of time close up underneath another tanker. So that was, from a pilot's point of view, a great thrill. Mike would be better placed to explain what he thought of it while we were horsing around behind another aeroplane. And of course it did concentrate the mind while you were literally only 20 feet or so from the back end of another aeroplane, particularly on Black Buck 1, 6 hours into the mission, when everything started to go squirrely and we found ourselves in the midst of a bunch of thunderstorms.
Which we've got plenty of near around the UK today, I think, as well.
Well, we're hoping to get this run in, as Glenn said, before the weather comes in. So we'll hopefully fire it up in about 30 minutes, and hopefully she'll work well and we'll impress the crowds as usual.
So, Mike, what's your role here?
I'm an electronics officer. This aircraft, I first started flying it as a bomber at RAF Wittering in 1964, and I've stuck with the Victor K2 all through my flying career. So I flew it as a blue steel low-level bomber on QRA with a nuclear weapon on. I then went on to do strategic reconnaissance with this aircraft as well. It was converted into carrying cameras. It also covered many nuclear tests by the Chinese and by the French governments, and we would go and do air sampling from either places like Midway in the South Pacific, or Shemya in the Aleutian Islands, or even from Lima in Peru. And we would collect samples for people at Aldermaston to analyse and work out exactly where those governments were in the development of a nuclear weapon. And then I moved on to tanking, and that's where I first met Bob. Again, I stuck with 715 and the K2. 715 litters my logbook. So I've done 25 years of flying in the Victor 2, over 5,000 hours in it, and I've got a great deal of respect and love for the airframe, and this particular one, because it is unusual. It did every role, every mark. It was converted 4 times and finished up as a tanker. And of course, historically, it was, as Bob said, on Ascension Island for the Falklands War, but it also was in Bahrain for Gulf War I. where 55 Squadron, the only tanker squadron left then, flew 299 missions and didn't miss one mission. So we can say this old lady here has a strong history behind it. It flew 38 missions in Gulf War I, and as I say, never missed a takeoff.
So, Mike, what's it take to keep this aircraft flying?
Well, us three, we're very fortunate. Having been trained on the Victor, we basically swan up when it's going to have a run. And whilst we have great respect for our engineers, there isn't much that we can do to keep it running. We rely on them as aviation enthusiasts. And very few of them are ex-RAF personnel. We have an ex-RAF airframe engines man, but all the rest are just really keen aviation enthusiasts, and they're the ones that keep the systems in good order. They, as you saw just now, they're doing the tyres for us, they do the oils for us, and then they hand it over to us to go and enjoy ourselves. We think that we're pleasing the crowd, but if we put our hand on our heart, this is really pleasing ourselves. Yeah.
So we want to wrap up now then, guys. One last question before we finish for each one of you. So start off with you, Glyn. It's a question we ask all the people we interview at air shows around the world. It's one question, put you on the spot, give them the chance to fly any aircraft in the world, albeit retired or still flying, commercial, military, GA. What would you jump into the sea of?
Concorde.
Concorde.
No doubt.
Bob?
I'm a bit more old school, probably a Mosquito.
Mosquito. Good choice.
Mine would definitely be a passenger, note the brevet. I don't have, if it is a skill, pilot skills, Spitfire.
Spitfire.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, guys, for your time today. It's been great and fascinating to speak to you, and I'm sure the listeners will love it. So on behalf of us, thanks for your time. Thank you.
I must be honest, I'm not at all surprised by some of those choices, actually. The Spitfire didn't surprise me at all as a choice. Concorde surprised me a little bit, especially from someone so wrapped up in sort of militaria, if you see what I mean. I was quite surprised by that as a choice.
The thing that it never ceases to amaze me about the enthusiasm for these folks that have flown these things. At every air show that I've been to, and we've done interviews with a few people now, their enthusiasm and their keenness to talk about their careers and what aircraft they've flown operationally or engineering wise, it's been absolutely fantastic. So they are so generous we just rock up with a mic and a camera. We didn't, we just said, right, can you do us a quick 10-minute interview, and there we did it. So it was really good. So really fascinating day at Bruntingthorpe, and we've got some more to come.
We have indeed. And
and I've got to say, for listeners that may not be familiar with that aircraft, it's a beautiful looking airplane. It's really menacing looking when you look at the wings that swoop down and the T-tail that swoops up and the engine intakes. It's just a very unusual and beautiful looking aircraft.
Yes, definitely. No, it's good. Well, and as I say, a few more still to come. But Nev, your camera is just wonderful. It has to be said. I mean, the visuals are just A1, mate. It's brilliant.
Yes, and I've not had a lot of experience with it yet. We've used it a few times on some shoots, and we'll be using it a lot at Farnborough in a few weeks.
I suspect we might well be, yes, absolutely. Looking forward.
Should be good. So,
indeed. Make sure you bring plenty of batteries with you, I think, for that one.
Yes, I think, yes, and some good charging cables. And
agreed.
Right, Matt, just remind me what we are doing something else before the military sector.
We are indeed, yes. So one of our very loyal listeners, the legend that is Matt Bunting-Frame, many of us obviously are familiar with him in the BFF group. Now, him and several other of our listeners all took a trip down to the Wings over Illawarra show, and he sent us a little interview from that.
G'day guys, a few weeks ago I interviewed Chris Tibbets from Beach Adventures from the Hunter Valley in New South Wales, Australia. We conducted the interview at Wings over Illawarra, which is Australia's second largest air show, held at Illawarra south of Sydney every May. Chris is a very experienced pilot with over 20 years of flying experience holding various ratings, and also has experience as an air boss at various Australian air shows. Chris and his wife Hayley are proud owners of a 1952 Beech 18. Some people call the Beech 18 a twin Beech. For Australia, this model is very rare, Now, if you're thinking what a Beech 18 looks like, think 1930s, think twin radial, think tail dragger, think Lockheed Electra, and scale it back just a bit. I was lucky enough to see Chris and Haley's Beech 18 in flight at Illawarra. Chris teaming up with Paul Bennett from Paul Bennett Air Shows to put on an amazing display. For Australian skies, the Beech 18 has quite a distinctive note. Now, if you're wondering what makes a Beech 18 so important, the simple fact that it was produced between 1937 and 1970 is enough. There were 9,000 airframes produced, which, as of 1970, was a world record. The Beech 18 in its classic form, as I mentioned, was a tail dragger, though later models came out with a retractable tricycle landing gear. Over its production life, the Beech 18 came out in 32 variants, with over 200 improvement modifications. The original Beech 18 from 1937 came out with 330 horsepower Jacob L6 radial engines, with the option of Wright 9760Es. Later models came out with 450 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R985 engines. Towards the end of production, 14 airframes were produced with turboprops. The Beech 18 has been used as a light bomber, a cloud seeder, a World War II training aircraft. It has been used to ferry cargo, as well as being used by various airlines for regional use. The last Beech 18 was delivered to Japan Airlines in 1970. Militarily, the Beech 18 served with the Canadian military as well as the US, being used heavily during World War II and the Vietnam War by Air America. The Beech 18 was finally retired from service with the US military in 1976. Now, about Miss Maple. Her name really gives it away. She's a classic model, being delivered to the Canadian military in 1952. It had various reincarnations. Miss Maple also appeared in a movie called South Pacific. Miss Maple is being lovingly restored by Chris and Haley to travel around the country with their family. As described in the interview, they have this fantastic new business called Beech Adventures. Beech Adventures was set up to give people an experience flying in a classic aircraft around the picturesque Hunter Valley in New South Wales. If you ever find yourself in New South Wales, make the trip north to the Hunter Valley and look them up. Now for the interview. Sit back. It's only short, but I hope you do enjoy it. Catch you later. Matt out.
Morning, Tipsy. How are you?
Fantastic, mate. How are you?
Very well, thank you very much. So you've got a bit of a story. You've got an interesting aircraft. What have you got?
I've got Beech 18.
The Beech 18?
I do.
That's a bit of a rare bird for Australia, is it not?
Yeah, I think there's less than half a dozen in Australia. 3 of this vintage, as far as I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, what's your background in aviation?
I've always wanted to fly from when I was a little child. My grandfather was in Lancasters in the Pathfinders in World War II. And so whether that sparked my interest or not, I've got no idea. It's finished school and took a loan out and got my licence and started doing charters in the Tiger Moth for the Newcastle Aero Club at 18 years old and sort of progressed from there. Just always been hanging around and can't get enough of it.
So, I think I met you once before about a year ago with Paul Bennett.
Yep.
And at that time, your Beech 18 or Miss Maple wasn't yet in the air. You're about to put some props on it.
Yes, yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you came across it and how you came to decide upon this particular type of aircraft and that journey?
Yeah, I heard about it through the grapevine. Obviously, everyone sort of knows everybody else in the aviation industry, and I heard there was a Beech 18 sitting by the side, and it's a classic aeroplane. It's got round engines. It's got the tail wheel. It doesn't have a training wheel. She just sort of fits the bill. And we were after a family aircraft and something that we could sort of utilise at air shows just to offset the running costs. And it just happened to be the perfect find. And what initially we thought was just going to be a quick fixer-upper and get her in the air turned into quite a project.
So how long did it take you to, from time of acquisition to wheels up for the first time?
It's about 2.5 years.
Did you have to do much to poor old Miss Maple? Because she looks absolutely beautiful.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks, mate. She basically had the works. And as you said earlier, new propellers, all the interior was gutted out. We stripped it down because she had been out in the open for a while. We did actually pull the aircraft right down into separate components, wings off, ripped the guts out, all the cockpit and all that sort of stuff. Just basically, we didn't want to be in a position where we found something later, or something could happen later that was obviously not ideal. So we figured once we had it apart, we'd do it all properly and go from there.
So the parts were all good, and there was nothing major that needed to be replaced.
Nothing.
No stories of gore.
No, mate, no. The biggest major component that had to be replaced were the propellers, but obviously everything else had to be replaced. So control cables, engine hoses, gaskets. The spar had to be stripped right back and inspected. So we had the wings off. Basically, just gave her a good going over, and lots and lots and lots and lots of little things.
Now, I know, Tibbsy, you've got a young family. It must have been pretty hard during that time whilst you're doing the aircraft up to Balancer 2. It must be a bit of an interesting story.
It was. So I think what we put into the aircraft more was the time is what's invested, because I did spend a lot of time away from the family while I was doing it. I was lucky enough that the guys could come out the hangar and play around. So in the corner of the hangar, there's actually a big toy box, and the kids would come around and
that's fantastic.
Play around under the wing while I'm pulling stuff apart and cleaning stuff and doing all that. So,
whilst we're talking now, your family's arrived. It's obviously an aircraft that you guys want to keep in the family for years to come.
Yeah. She's a cracking bit of gear, and hopefully I can pass her off down the line to Max. He's 4 years old. He loves aviation, and hopefully one day he can pay the bills.
Here you go, here's the keys. But guess what?
Guess what, mate? Guess what comes with it? Yes.
So you before you mentioned that you use the aircraft to offset the costs. How do people get to see your aircraft?
So we travel around. We do a lot of regional air shows, and obviously the aircraft's only been in the air less than 12 months. So we're just getting it on the scene and getting it out there. We are planning in the next couple of months to have an approval for adventure flights, which means people can come for a flight and take their family and basically just experience vintage aviation.
So whereabouts are you guys looking to be based out of to do that?
Hunter Valley, yeah. So quite a short hop to the coast. I'm not sure how much time you spent up around Newcastle and Lake Macquarie, but it's a beautiful area. We've got the Hunter Valley Vineyards very close by as well. So it's quite a handy area. It's quite close to everything. We're not in the midst of a big city like Sydney.
Yes.
And it's a relatively short flight anyway. If we want to go up the coast, if we want to go inland, if we want to come down to events like this, it's all sort of within reach.
So we've also just, when we were talking last night, you mentioned about the flying characteristics of this aircraft and its idiosyncrasies. Do you want to tell us a little bit about those? What makes the Beech 18 a Beech 18 as a flying piece of kit?
No worries. Well, you've got those two beautiful Pratt & Whitney 985s pulling you along. The aircraft does get along quite well. It has a very useful load. So this aircraft, with its maximum takeoff weight, will carry close to 2 tonnes, including fuel. In the air, it is surprisingly agile. So its roll and pitch. Roll and yaw is actually quite light. The pitch can be a little bit heavy. We need to offset that with the trim because it does have a very large elevator. So, especially at higher speeds when we're displaying it, we are working the trim wheel quite a bit. But in the air, she's surprisingly agile and a delight to fly.
Yesterday, we were watching it. I was standing next to your wife whilst you were up in the air with Paul, and the way you guys were able to throw her around in the air was absolutely incredible. I couldn't believe that something that big could actually move in the way that you guys were able to show her off.
Yeah, thanks, mate. They are quite a nimble machine. As long as you're on top of it, and obviously when we're displaying, we're obviously thinking worst case scenario. So we are in the turns, even though it does look like we get a bit slow, we're always above blue line. So if we lose an engine, we're obviously still at that speed where we can maintain control of the aircraft. And I wouldn't say smoke and mirrors, but a lot of the stuff we do in the display is obviously tailored, so we show off the handling characteristics of the aircraft.
So with your venture, with your tours, how can people get in contact with you?
At this stage, probably the best way to get in contact is either via Facebook at Beech Adventures. Beech is spelled with 2 E's, as the aircraft is a Beechcraft. or our webpage, which is beachadventures.com.au.
To finish off the interview, I had one more question for Chris. Here's his response.
So, Tibbsy, given the opportunity, and I know you've flown a lot of classic birds,
What do I want to fly?
what do you want to fly?
A P-38 or a Lancaster. So I think I'll sort of give myself away there with a twin tail and,
Yeah.
and the twin engines or 4 engines.
Probably got more of an opportunity with the P-38 than you had the Lancaster.
Oh, yeah, I do, yeah. Obviously, relatively unrealistic, but you never know. I've still got a few years left in me yet.
Hey, as you say, aviation's a very small community and you never know what can happen.
That's exactly right, mate, yeah.
I thank you very much for your time this morning, and
No worries, mate. Thanks
I
for
wish
coming
you all the best with your new venture, and I'd like to come up and go out with you on a flight sometime.
I'm sure we can sort something out, mate.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
No worries, mate.
Well, apologies for the issues with some of the audio there. I don't know quite what happened. It didn't sound that bad before, so I'll try and work out what I did wrong there. So apologies to Matt for that. I obviously screwed that up somewhere along in the edit, so humble apologies. You can't get the staff, Nev, I tell you, it's awful.
Well, there you are. But what a fascinating story, and what a
fascinating
gentleman he was speaking to as well.
Absolutely, I love that. I love it. It's a beautiful looking aircraft. It's a Beech 18, wasn't it?
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, also known as a twin beach, typically is how it's referred to, or that's how I've always referred to it. And when I was an undergraduate, Ohio University had a twin beach that's part of its training program, but it was one that one of the pilots actually tore the tail wheel off of it, and it was converted to a nose wheel and a tricycle landing gear, and it just never looked the same. But those beautiful tail dragging twin beaches are wonderful aircraft. Big radial engines, great sound, beautiful to look at.
Beautiful. No, it's great. No, and thanks, Matt. Again, he sent us a couple of interviews in actually that have been really good. So yeah, thanks for taking the time. And any listeners, if you do get the opportunity to chat to a pilot, you only have to ask them one question once you've had a chat. Obviously, you all know what that is. But do feel free to send any of your contributions into podcast@planetalkinguk.com. That's podcast@planetalkinguk.com.
Right, so next up then, it's the military segment. So we've got a few stories that we're going to rattle through. So if you're ready, Matt.
Certainly am.
And if you're ready, Micah.
All set.
And Owen.
I'm here ready.
Off we go. Well, this is on the Flight Global website, and the never-ending story, it seems, about the delays to the KC-46 tanker. But Boeing has finally reached an agreement with the US Air Force to deliver its first KC-46 Pegasus tanker in October of this year. The Chicago-based aerospace manufacturer was contracted to deliver the first batch of 18 KC-46s by August 2017, but missed that deadline after having production issues. The US Air Force said it now expects that the first 18 aircraft will be delivered by April of next year, 2019. This agreement paves the way for the delivery of the first tanker to the US Air Force 16 and a half years after the US Senate first proposed a replacement plan for the KC-135 Stratotanker, which was a 1950s era machine. The first KC-46 will be delivered to McConnell Air Force Base in Kansas. Then aircraft will be delivered to Altus Air Force Base in Oklahoma and Pease Air Force Base in New Hampshire. Boeing said that it has 43 aircraft in some stage of production, including 34 aircraft, which are now in the final stages of build. This has been a long time coming. It's going to be a great day to get this capability to them, says Leanne Carey, President and Chief Executive of Boeing Defense. There's a lot of people who have worked countless hours and have just been tireless in their commitment to them. The US Air Force and Boeing are still discussing on how to resolve remaining Category 1 deficiencies on the KC-46, such as sunlight glare problems with the aircraft's refueling boom camera and design problems that cause the drogue refueling hose to disconnect in certain situations. The KC-46 is a converted 767-2C freighter that can be used by the military for aerial refueling or cargo transport. The tanker's boom system can transfer up to 4,540 litres of fuel per minute to other aircraft whilst in flight, and its Cobham-supplied hose and drogue systems located on both the plane's wing and centerline enable the tanker to refuel probe-equipped aircraft with up to 1,510 litres of fuel per minute. So finally, this aircraft is finally going to go off the end of the production line and make its way to the US Air Force.
A small part of me is thinking, actually, you know, I'll believe it when I see it. I've got to be honest.
Did you notice that they said they planned on delivering them in October through April? They didn't plan on delivering working ones, though.
Right, that's right.
yes. Not making any promises, yeah. It does so.
And to put things into perspective for those that don't really follow the military, the aircraft that it's replacing, the Boeing KC-135, is a 707. So that's really how old it is. There aren't any more flying 707s in commercial use, but the Air Force has been using the 707, the KC-135, as a tanker, and it's still in service right now. So that's a bit of an issue. I'm hoping to see a KC-46 because they will be, as I mentioned, basing them in Pease Air Force Base. And actually, it's Pease Airport now in New Hampshire. That's only about 50 miles away from me, so I'm hoping to get down and see them when they come up.
Yeah, it's gonna be good, isn't it? So we're gonna move on to the next story now. This is on the. He said, I'm not very good at this doing it all myself business. Sorry about that. So Pilot Web is the what am I reading? News story. That's right. Yes, sorry. Pilot Web is the website, and the headline is airspace restrictions announced for Royal Air Force 100 fly past. So the UK Civil Aviation Authority has announced a series of airspace restrictions to protect the fly past in July to commemorate 100 years of the Royal Air Force. Restrictions will be in place for the main flypast on Tuesday the 10th of July, and also the rehearsal, which will take place on one day between Tuesday the 3rd and Friday the 6th of July. The flypast, comprising a large number of RAF aircraft, will start to form in the vicinity of the Wash, the North Sea and Southwold, Suffolk and Southend. Wow, right on my part of the world then for a change. It will then route via Swaffham, Thetford and Colchester towards London to overfly Buckingham Palace. The aircraft will then disperse over Kent, Surrey, Berkshire, Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire, Gloucestershire and Wiltshire. Further flypasts will take place at the Royal International Air Tattoo at RAF Fairford each day from the 13th to the 15th of July. The flypast elements will form up over Shropshire and route over Worcestershire and Gloucestershire before overflying RAF Fairford and dispersing over Wiltshire. The airspace restrictions have been put in place due to the large number of aircraft involved. The restrictions apply to all airspace users, including drones. Pilots and drone operators are reminded to take account of restrictions when planning flights. The restrictions are in place for the safety of all aircraft, as airspace infringements pose a significant risk to safety. On Saturday the 2nd of June 2018 at the Torbay Air Show, an aircraft infringed the restricted area, resulting in an air prox with a display aircraft. The CAA takes all airspace infringements seriously, and due to the severity of this incident, the pilot's licence has been provisionally suspended pending an investigation. For further information, please see the Aeronautical Information Circulars M043/2018 and M049/2018 and M051. 2018 on the NATS Aeronautical Information Services website. So if you do need to know what, I presume you'll know TAMS. That's essentially what I'm talking about, isn't it?
Yes.
Something along those. So if you need to know the routes essentially and where the restrictions are going to be in place, then those the NATS website is where you need to go. But of course we had something similar, didn't we, when we were at Duxford, didn't we, where I think, was it the Red Arrows had to be halted because there was a microlight straying into the
Yes,
the
there
fly
was,
past
and
route.
causing some difficulty there locally. And but yes, they just had to hold off for, was it 5 minutes?
It was a little while, wasn't it? It was about 5-6 minutes, wasn't it? While they were waiting to sort of shoo this the microlight out of the way.
Yes.
It's a funny one though. But this fly past looks amazing. I can't wait to. I'm gonna have to head out towards Southwold if on one of these days, if I can find out exactly when. Because I bet that'll be some amazing signs off the East Coast, sites off the East Coast there, I think, actually. Because Southwold is not... Southwold's only about 12, 13 miles away from me, so...
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. So the next story then is for you, Micah.
Well, all right then. And this one is from Flight Global. And the U.S. Air Force is set to begin dual-mode ramjet design for a hypersonic vehicle. The Air Force has set plans to begin a competitive phase of a plan to develop a dual-mode ramjet for a new class of missile and aircraft with top speeds of over Mach 3. 2 contract awards, worth a total of $10 million for design and testing of a dual-mode ramjet are now anticipated. The Air Force Research Laboratory says in a notice dated 8th of June. The acquisition will begin with the signing of an initial task orders worth up to $200,000 each, and it's part of the Air Force. Don't know if I put that in there before. Air Force Research Laboratories, enabling technologies for high-speed operable systems. The Air Force Research Technology Laboratories unveiled the purpose of the High-Speed Technology System Program in 2016 as goals to complete the design of a dual-mode ramjet, build a test article, and perform wind tunnel and free jet testing, the acquisition notice says. Now, basically, what this is, to go over it just a little bit easier, it would be use a gas turbine to take off and accelerate the vehicle to faster than Mach 2. At that point, the propulsion system would transition the thrust to a dual-mode ramjet. In the first mode, the aircraft is flying over Mach 3, but the airflow entering the engine intake is slowed to subsonic speed. As the aircraft accelerates beyond Mach 5, the flow entering the ram engines becomes supersonic. It's part of a concept that has been put together by Lockheed Martin as the heart of the SR-72. Now, you all know the SR-71 Blackbird. That only goes about Mach 3, which is about 2,200 miles an hour. That came out in the late 50s. And we haven't had an aircraft that we know of go faster than that since. So it's about time, and they've been talking about this for years in popular science and popular mechanics, of coming up with an aircraft that's going to go faster. And this is the first step that we're actually taking to develop it, as far as we know.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? But yes, a huge development. But these, as with so many things in aviation, really difficult things to do like that, this always take a long time in coming, don't they?
They do.
Yeah. So the final military story then, Owen, is for you, and it's on the RAF website as well. Are you there, Owen?
He's muted.
He has muted himself. I don't know if he realises that. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Something's obviously gone horribly wrong there. Okay. I'll take this one then. So This is. Oh no, hang on. He's unmuted. Maybe we can hear him now. Are you there?
I do.
There we go.
A bit of a problem with my touch screen. My bad. So this harps back to Matt's military story, so the second story, and it basically details all of the centenary celebrations for the RAF. So it's on the raf.mod.uk website, and it says on the 10th of July, 100 days after our official 100th birthday, join us in London for our centerpiece event, the RAF 100 Parade and Flypast. It says over 1,000 servicemen and women will take part in a parade on the Mall at 11:25 a.m. and then at 1 p.m. witness the historic flypast where the 100 aircraft representing the RAF's history will fly over Buckingham Palace. It promises to be a spectacle never seen before and one that won't be seen again for a very, very long time. How can you take part? Well, you can take a front row seat and experience the celebrations in person with viewing positions along the length of the Mall in London, or you can watch live coverage on the BBC or stream on BBC iPlayer to watch the events as they unfold live. Alternatively, you can listen to the BBC Radio 2 for further coverage.
Oh.
And if you do have any photos, videos, or comments, you can use the hashtag RAF100. So there's a whole lot of other things that are happening in and around the country for the RAF 100 tour, including a range covering the history of World War One, World War Two, the Cold War, right up to the modern era. And you'll be able to get close to some of these aircraft in a few different places. So on the 6th to the 9th of July, you'll be able to see them in London. There's details of that on the RAF's website on where exactly they'll be. Same goes for the 10th to the 12th of August in Newcastle. That's Newcastle, Northern Ireland, not Newcastle in
the UK,
England.
yeah.
25th to 27th in August in Birmingham, 31st of August to the 2nd of September in Glasgow, and the 14th to the 16th of September in Manchester. And they say it's got a really good educational focus, so great for young aviation fans out there. Lots of activities designed to encourage interest and participation from young people. So there's so many events going on to do with the RAF 100. And if you are around the UK this summer, do take a look at the RAF website if you'd like to go visit some of this stuff.
I mean, it's going to be an amazing, sort of fly past and things. I mean, the old Battle of Britain fly past, I know we're sort of quite familiar with that here in the UK, but that is something to behold. I mean, I remember it from Duxford when we were there. I mean, so many iconic aircraft all flying together. It's just, was it the Spitfire? They at Duxford they also did like a sort of like Spitfire dogfight, didn't they? That was just fantastic.
But glad to see that the RAF are making a big, and actually the UK generally making a big noise,
making a big thing
about the
it.
centenary. Yeah. It's really important, and I'm glad that they're doing it.
It is.
Yeah, rightly so.
Events.
Rightly so.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
indeed.
Right, well, that's the end of the military segment, and next up is one of Pilot Pip's segments, and he sends this in to us almost every week, I have to say. I think he's doing quite a nice job for it as well.
He is.
And this is his PPE segment.
Indeed, yes. He's just as he says at the top of this, he's actually just had he's come back from 5 days off, but this is his diary of the week before.
Plane safety from the flight deck with Pilot Pip.
Hello everybody, welcome to another PPE, Pip's Pilot Experience. I'm in the middle of 5 days off at the moment, but I have been at work last week, and it started off with a very busy few days, flying all over the place, 3 or 4 flights every day. I then got what we call double wockled, which is 2 very early consecutive starts in a row. I won't go into the details, but it basically means that after my second day of very early starts, I have to have 36 hours off, including 2 nights, which ended up in Paris, actually. So I had a lovely 36 hours off in Paris, spent a really nice day walking around the old city, seeing the sights, went to the Cathedral of Notre Dame, as made famous in the novel by Alexander Dumas, or Dumas, as Homer Simpson would say. Took a nice boat trip down the Seine River and visited some of the less well-known sites of Paris. Really nice day, and then finished it off with a nice dinner and watching England thrash Tunisia in a nice little bar over in Montmartre. So really nice. Doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's lovely. But anyway, I did end up at some point, one of the first couple of days, at Farnborough Airport, which is kind of London's BizJet executive airport. It's a lot of cities have their own airport which is dedicated to BizJet stuff. New York has Teterboro, Paris has Le Bourget, etc. And Farnborough is a really busy airport. Okay, there's no two ways about it. As we taxied in, we landed there and taxied in, there was not a spare inch of parking space anywhere on the apron. It was totally full with aircraft, and mostly of the larger size when we're talking about BizJet, so the Globals and the larger Gulfstreams, the G550s, and the G650, which I have to say is just a wonderful looking aeroplane. They got the proportions just right. It's got curves in all the right places. The G550, which our company flies, it's okay. I prefer the Global, but the 650, I don't know what it is, but they got something right with that aeroplane. Really beautiful thing. Anyhow, there were loads of them, absolutely packed, and Farnborough has just become so busy over the years. Always was busy, but now it's super busy. One of the, I suppose, challenges of flying at Farnborough Airport is that it's located in Class G uncontrolled airspace, which means that anyone can fly there. You don't even need to be talking to air traffic control to be flying in the local area. You obviously, if you're going to be landing at the airport, it is a towered, fully controlled airport, but the surrounding airspace is Class G. So when we're flying in and out of there, one of the things we talk about a lot when we're doing our briefings, when we're identifying our threats and threat mitigation during the briefings, is the fact that it's uncontrolled. So there will be, or possibly could be, light aircraft, gliders, balloons, etc., flying around, not squawking, not talking to ATC. So we really do take a great deal of effort to get our eyes outside the cockpit and have a good look around and try and search out for these potential threats. One of the things that I always like to do there is to keep the airspeed really low. Once we're coming in out of the London controlled airspace, or if we've just taken off from Farnborough, I'll try and keep the speed all the way back at 180 knots if I can, just to give us a bit more opportunity and a little bit more time to see and avoid, and for the other people as well. It gives them a better chance of acquiring us. Now, of course, Farnborough Radar, they provide different levels of radar service. We always, in fact, we're required by our SOPs to request a deconfliction service. Farnborough Radar there will give us information on conflicting traffic and give us vectors to avoid that traffic. And that's not a particularly unusual situation in the UK. There are other quite busy airports that are inside Class G airspace, Oxford, Biggin Hill, to name just a few. But ideally, as pilots, what we would like is some protected airspace. We would like some controlled airspace. And I've often wondered why they don't have any controlled airspace around Farnborough, because the number of movements compared to other airports which do have controlled airspace would certainly suggest that it should have some. Now, controlled airspace, even Class D airspace, which is what we're talking about here, that would provide us with the protection of operating in a 100% known environment. To fly in Class D airspace, if you're a GA aircraft, you'd have to call up air traffic control and ask permission to fly in that bit of controlled airspace. You couldn't just be flying through willy-nilly without permission. And Farnborough is an interesting case. They have been seeking approval for a number of years to have their own controlled airspace around the airport. But it is, they're in a tricky position because they've got a number of different parties involved here. Obviously, the airports and the operators would like controlled airspace, but there are other people out there as well. The GA community, for one, who are, as a rule, quite anti-controlled airspace, if you like, and I can kind of understand that view, and I'll perhaps touch on that in a second. The other big player down at Farnborough is Lasham Gliding, which is just to the southwest of Farnborough. Lasham Gliding Airfield is probably the biggest, if not one of the bigger, gliding centres in all of Europe, and they seem to have, from what I understand, an unusual amount of influence at the CAA when it comes to airspace policy. So they've been putting up a bit of a fight when it comes to implementing controlled airspace. But really, if you have a look around the UK, have a look at some of the other smaller regional airports that do have controlled airspace and then compare them to Farnborough. So, for instance, Sheffield Doncaster Airport, a little bit further north, has a block of Class D airspace around it. And that has, according to the 2017 stats, they have about 17,000 movements, aircraft movements per year. I don't know how many of those are commercial and how many of those are just GA, private aircraft, Cessnas and PA-28s and alike. I suspect quite a few of that 17,000 is just private movements, but they do have their own protected airspace, okay? Let's have a look at Southend, London Southend Airport. Has about 25,000 movements annually. Again, probably a bigger portion of those are commercial air traffic, but certainly there'll be some a fair number of that will be private GA traffic. And again, they've recently had their own airspace. In fact, quite a big block of airspace as well. I know it kicked up quite a fuss in the GA community. Moving a bit further afield, Norwich Airport has about 37,000 movements, and they've got their own airspace. Now, a lot of those, I believe, is helicopter for the North Sea. I know they've taken on quite a lot of that traffic recently. And then you've got Farnborough, which has 27,000 movements, and they're all commercial air transport movements. There's very little GA goes on at Farnborough. It's, as I said earlier, it's a dedicated exec bizjet type airport. So when you compare the numbers to other similar airports, they've certainly got the traffic numbers going through to warrant having their own airspace. Now, as I say, the GA community generally seem to be, at least from my perception, seem to be quite anti-airspace. And when you have a look at a southern UK aeronautical map, it is a bit of a mess, it has to be said, at first glance. The reality is it's actually reasonably simple, but there's a lot of airfields with their own airspace, and the interaction with the London TMA, it can get quite complicated, and I can't help feeling that the best solution here is probably just to start again from afresh. This thing has developed over many decades, and perhaps it's time to start with a fresh sheet of paper and redesign this from scratch. But it is what it is, and we've got to deal with what we've got. But I don't really understand this reluctance on the GA side to accept controlled airspace. Now, the argument being that I guess it's a loss of freedom, that they can't fly where and when they wish. But the reality is, and especially we're only talking about Class D airspace here, that I suspect, I don't have any stats to back this up, but probably 90+% of all requests to enter controlled airspace are granted. But the perception seems to be that it's not worth the effort, perhaps, or you're adding to the controller workload, or you're afraid of being vectored, or you're afraid of being given an unusual routing by ATC. I don't know. The reality is it's really very simple. And speaking with my GA hat on here, taking my professional hat off, putting my PA28 hat on, in the small number of flights I've made recently, it's been extremely simple. I've flown through the Birmingham airspace, thrown through the Luton airspace. Very straightforward and nothing to be scared of at all. But I can't help but feel that perception is out there. And after all, it only adds another layer of safety. It's, if it's giving us an extra barrier separating fast jet traffic against slow single engine traffic, then that can only be a good thing, right? Well, anyway, we'll have to wait and see. I know that it's been a long battle down at Farnborough, and perhaps something will happen in the future. I was lucky enough a year or so ago to be invited over to the Farnborough Tower and the Farnborough Radar Room to have a tour around there and talk to some of the controllers there. And it was really quite enlightening, as well as the tower there, which controls the movements at the airfield. That's also where Farnborough LARS is based, and LARS is Lower Air Space Radar Service. And Farnborough is the kind of central point for a very large portion of the southern UK, which provides what you would call in the States flight following. They provide a radar flight information service there for most of the southeast of the country. Very, very busy unit indeed. Anyway, that's all from me. I've got to go and prepare a flight of my own. I'm going to be flying tomorrow. Hopefully, if my aircraft is back from its annual maintenance check and if the weather's nice, I'm going to be flying down to see family in Kent for the weekend. So I'm going to fly from Cranfield down to Rochester, which again will mean flying straight through the middle of the Luton Class D airspace. So looking forward to that tomorrow. Until the next time, see you all and fly safe.
That was all very interesting.
He keeps himself busy, doesn't he?
Yes, it's all very. I think the thing is with the different airspace restrictions, especially there's so many smaller airports and airfields around the London and South East area, particularly. And when you get up the country and where you are, Matt, it's not so bad, but certainly in the South East and the central part of the southern area is so chock-a-block that it's not surprising that they might have to have a rethink of the whole thing one of these days. I suppose it's the same. I mean,
it's not just here, I suppose, because obviously here we're sort of quite a rural. A lot of East Anglia is quite rural, and I presume that's the same throughout the country. There are pockets of busy airspace as a result of sort of commercial airports and stuff. But I suppose however you dress it up. I know we take the mickey out of the fact that it's London Southend, London Stansted. One day it'll be London Manchester. It's sort of it's sort of one of those things. They're so sort of close to. They are genuinely though. I mean, they are essentially sort of 30-40 miles around the periphery of London. And when you do have so many major airports so close to it, obviously that airspace, especially around Farnborough, must be so congested.
Well, I'm surprised, frankly, that it's not London Farnborough.
Right. Yes, good point. Yes, it is.
The runway is large enough to accommodate that. And they need more commercial space. I don't understand why it's not happening.
Right.
I mean, certainly Oxford, which is the closest one to me, that's called London Oxford.
Is it?
Yeah,
that's a bit crazy.
Yes, it's probably pushing it a little bit, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, I want to let you know, I don't know if you've noticed my hat, but Pip and I were not in cahoots. I did not put this hat on knowing that Pip was going to speak about Gulfstream, but nonetheless, I agree with him.
There's an alarming level of continuity here in the show. We can't have that. We need to change the subject immediately. Right, yeah, indeed. But no, thank you, Pip. Thank you very much for a great segment, and hopefully there'll be another one next week. So it's time to sort of start wrapping up, really. What has everybody got in their calendars?
We wrap up.
Oh, hello.
We've got another little bit of a military story that I think we should definitely cover it. And I'm surprised we haven't covered it, actually.
Nev, this isn't in the show notes. What do we do? Panic.
It's okay, because it's from Reuters.com, a very reputable source.
Right.
And it says that Trump has ordered the creation of Space Force.
Oh, no. Oh, really?
Space Force.
Micah, do you have anything to add to this?
Fortunately, nobody here is paying attention to him with that. That was just the silliest idea that I have heard in the longest time. We already have a Space Force. It's called the Air Force. And it's in Cheyenne Mountain, where they monitor everything in space. In Colorado, I've been through there, and it's just ridiculous, And we also have NASA. And so between the two of them, anyway,
they've probably got it covered, haven't they? Yes.
I cannot take responsibility for the leader of the United States.
Nay, the leader of the free world is quite often the argument. But
I feel that he's the kind of guy that would evacuate an aircraft with his baggage. So,
right. Okay.
Yeah. Ooh, his gold-plated baggage.
Oh, of course, absolutely, very heavy, of course. But he's the president of the United States. Obviously, he can do what he likes. Anyway, this is a rather controversial subject matter, so I'm going to stop you in your tracks there, Owen. I think we should. Yes, I must admit, I did see this story in the week, and I did literally look at it and think, oh dear,
I think it's just another one of his little
brilliant ideas. Absolutely brilliant ideas.
It's always fun here in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. Any comments you'd like to? Oh no! Let's not mention that word. Come on, that's twice now. Anything to add to that, Nev?
No, not particularly. No, because whatever I say ends up being controversial anyway. So.
Right.
Well, actually, just reading down in the article, it does say.
Oh, you're actually going to do it? Oh, wow. Okay.
No, I'm not reading the article, but I have read it. Okay. Actually, it says that while the Pentagon is actually going to start preparing to implement Trump's order,
right?
It can't. Trump actually can't do anything about it without Congress because it would need the budgetary approval of the U.S. Congress.
Oh dear! Now we're sort of venturing into the realms of politics. I wonder if we should abort.
No, I think that we should let it go, and I just think it would have been really nice if our fearless leader had taken a civics class. But that's
right. Story. Okay. I just see the trouble is all I've got is the I've got the Emperor's March in my head now from Star Wars. All I can hear is dun 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 dun. Presumably with Lord Trump at the helm, but anyway, perhaps that's where he's getting his.
There's a scary thought.
Yes, maybe that's where he's getting his ideas from. So last weekend I had a rather interesting time. Some of you may actually sort of remember perhaps that it was the Great Yarmouth Air Show last weekend. So it was on Saturday and Sunday. One of the reasons why we didn't cover it actually was basically because it was an air display, and there was lots of things for the general public, if you like, to have a go on and things, but there wasn't really a lot for us to cover. We couldn't interview pilots and stuff because one of the great advantages about it being over the water, obviously, is that it's probably one of the most safe air shows you'll ever come across. But of course, there aren't pilots landing to interview, which is not a great deal of us. But I must say, hats off to Great Yarmouth. They did an excellent job of organising a brilliant show that was over 2 days. My personal thanks to Graham Haley, who I got to meet up with, because he actually came down on the Sunday, and it's his photos that I've got up on the screen here, so thank you very much to Graham Haley for that. But it really was, despite the weather doing its very best to try and to spoil our fun, I must say it was a really good fun show. And it's some people have sort of criticised it really for not appearing to be well organised, but I have to say I strongly disagree with that. I was actually there working for the company that was operating the park and ride system, and I have to say they ran it. I feel they ran it really well. It was, you weren't waiting for the buses to be full. If there was a group of 15, 20 of you come, they literally then just released the bus, so nobody throughout the entire day, nobody had to stand around waiting for the park and ride system to sort of, to take them home. So I mean, and it was it was really nice. It was a warm enough day to sort of be walking around in shorts and t-shirt. But it was a lovely day, and you got to love the Red Arrows, who sort of appeared on both the Saturday and the Sunday. But yeah, that's really what I did over the weekend. Nev, presumably you were coming back from your holiday.
Yes, well, actually, we did a Wednesday to Wednesday sort of thing. So yes, I on the weekend I was in Albufeira in the Algarve in Portugal, which was very nice indeed. Just as I said earlier, it was spot on with the temperature. Yeah. And we got back on Wednesday night quite late, but still recovering from that now. I still feel quite tired. I think I need another holiday to recover from the holiday.
For a holiday to it's because it was your honeymoon, Nev. That's what it is. You see.
That's That's what it was.
Indeed. Micah, what about you? What have you been up to?
Well, on Monday I was returning from DC, and I think you may have a photo there, Matt, of my Kreplech brother and good friend Eric, who you've met, toasting you. I don't know if you have it there in front of you.
Ooh, where would I find that? Where did you send me that?
It went through the other photos that I sent you, I believe, with the in the chat application, whatever.
Oh, okay. Yes, hang on. I'm trying now. Hang on. Sorry. Anyway, everybody keep talking.
We went to the Kosher Nosh, which is the name of a deli.
Yeah.
And we toasted you with a pastrami sandwich and a corned beef sandwich, and had the waitress specifically take our pictures so we could send it to you, because we knew you would like both.
I have bad news, ladies and gentlemen. My co-host has just arrived home.
Oh no!
Fortunately, we haven't got a microphone in front of us. Where did you send it to, Micah? I'm struggling to find it.
I sent it with WhatsApp.
Ah, okay. Oh, hello. Oh, we've got a very weary Carlos has just joined us in the studio. Hello. Right, okay. Splendid. Anyway, there's Owen. What about you? What have you got going on this week?
For me, well, last week I was flying. I did 2 days of standby, and it was kind of, well, it was after a long sort of 2 weeks that I had. I had recurrent training where we have to do the exams for our safety and emergency procedures, our dangerous goods, security exams, all that sort of thing. So I did those about a week and a half ago now, and passed all those. So I'm good to
Very
fly
good,
for
very
year.
good. Well done. Very, very well.
And then This week I have another little bit of flying to do. It's all short sectors, so I go out to Lublin and back tomorrow, which is in Poland. Aalborg, which is in Denmark, I want to say.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. It's just as well Nev's here, obviously he's on the ball. Yeah.
Short flight. And then I have 2 days of going to Napoli, and then a few days off. So actually, really quite an easy week this week, thankfully.
Sounds like a refreshing change then.
Yes.
So presumably you're back to work this week, Nev. That's going to be a bit of a shock for you, isn't it?
Yeah, on Monday, I'm my first day back for nearly 2 weeks. So yes, the emails haven't been too bad, but there's just so much stuff. You do have to turn it off after a while, because otherwise you just spoil your holiday.
I must admit, I did panic a bit because when I had to send you an email during the week, and I got this immediate reply back that came, "I'm sorry, I'm unavailable to." I was just like, "Whoa, he's unplugged. This is very frightening." I thought, God, it really is. It really is the honeymoon, isn't it? He's unplugged. Good news, Micah. I have found the picture. There we are. That's the one that you were talking about.
There we go.
This is it. Yes.
Cheers.
See, this brings back very fond memories of my time in New York. This does.
We were just thinking that the next time you come out there, we may have to kidnap you and take you to this particular deli in New Jersey, because among the other pictures, they have a marvelous salad bar. But it's not any salad bar. It's pickles, it's tomatoes, it's potato salad, and coleslaw and health salad. You'll love it.
You say the word salad, and I just glaze over.
Oh, no,
really,
this is very different.
Indeed.
There's probably a picture of that someplace, too.
Yeah, indeed. Nev, I suppose we'd better wrap up, really, haven't we?
Indeed, and many thanks to you, Micah, for joining us today. Really
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much. My pleasure. Love being with you guys.
And for Owen as well, even though I had a bit of a technical moment at the start there, but it all kind of worked out pretty well. Yeah.
Nice. And his camera's not been working all the way through the show. Just give it a press. You never know. We might get a quick glimpse of him before we. There he is, briefly. There it was, gone. We literally get to see it for about 1 second. Brilliant.
The best looking one of us all, and we can't see him.
I know, it's not fair, is it? Yeah, absolutely outrageous. Anyway, never mind. I'm sure we'll see you again soon, Owen. And that's it. Time to wrap up, guys. From all of us here in the studio, Carlos is here. Come round this side, Carlos, and say hello to your beloved fans very quickly. There we go. There he is. Look.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hey there.
Make it tonight.
Indeed. So from all of us here in the studio, it is time to say goodbye. What are you doing behind my head? I don't like it. I'm quick. I can't find the buttons now. You're putting me off. From everybody here in the studio, it's time to say goodbye. Say goodbye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.